Welcome to all. I see many of our partners here today and many friends from the wider industry, some strangers too, so welcome and hope you enjoy getting to know us and the work that we're doing. Our virtual Climate Week session this week is the start of our Insight series of webinars at Travelist. We'll be kicking off a series of these webinars this autumn to allow you some deeper insights into the industry-wide projects that we're working on. First, allow me to introduce myself and my fellow panelists today. My name is Julie. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Travelist and joined exactly 364 days ago today. I'm joined by my colleagues Jess Steenkamp, who is our Senior Product Manager for Accommodation at Travelist. She is responsible for all of our accommodation-related solutions. And by Priyanth Sunka, who is our Senior Manager of Technology, responsible for all of our ecosystems, approaches, and interoperable solutions at Travelist. If you haven't met us before, Travelist is a global not-for-profit that is changing travel for good. We were founded by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, 6 years ago now. And we are a global independent coalition of partners working for systemic change in the travel industry. Through multi-stakeholder collaboration, our $3 trillion plus coalition of partners mobilizes our beloved travel industry to provide trusted information at scale so that we empower every decision maker in the market to make better decisions that will positive impact travel. Some of our partners are shown on the screen. We're incredibly proud to have all of these folks around the table with us. It's a powerful coalition of change makers, and we work in a pre-competitive coalition to drive systems change for the greater good together. I'm excited to launch our Insight series today. So we'll talk about the Data Hub today, and this is predominantly focused on accommodation work right now, growing really quickly into other verticals. And we're thrilled to be able to kick it off with Jess and Priyan. Then towards the end of October, we'll talk about the travel impact model, which is the aviation model for sharing sustainability data at scale and better traveler decision making, with the line of corporate travel as the emphasis. In November, you can join our policy and industry relations team for the sustainability policy landscape and some updates in that interesting and ever-changing space. And then watch out for the date of our certifications webinar, which will follow. Today, we'll be talking about the Data Hub and how this Data Hub underpins our approach and our theory of change. To note, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat, which is open to all of you, and we will allow plenty of Q&A time at the end of the webinar today to get to your questions. At Travelist, we believe that data is the key to unlocking systems change, because data about important sustainability information at scale should be available in an open access way. This data is then processed into information in a structured and organized way, and those insights can be fed through to decision makers in the right place at the right time in a consistent and compliant and reliable format. For example, travelers wanting to make decisions about whether they fly, whether they take a train, which hotel to book at, which experiences to book. Corporate travelers understanding impacts of their travel decisions. Policymakers understanding benchmarks for a particular industry or region. Destinations being able to use this data to understand their destination impacts and put in place credible climate action and social justice plans. And so data underpins our theory of change at Travelist. The Data Hub that we've built, that we'll talk about today, is our way of unlocking the healthy flow of data through this system for all of the players. The Data Hub today that we launched was announced first 364 days ago in Climate Week, New York last year. Sally and the Duke announced the acquisition of a platform called Weaver, and this sustainability platform for accommodations has been repurposed in an open access way to allow data to flow freely and openly deliver the information that we need in order to drive the systems change that we want the sustainability data to be able to generate in our travel industry that we all love in order to future-proof it. Weaver has allowed us to leapfrog our ability to provide this open access sustainability data. And why did we decide to do this? We heard from our partners and industry coalition that sustainability data needs to flow openly and freely, to deliver systems change. And so we set about our mission to do just this. And in just one day, under a year, we're ready to launch it back to you today, all of our colleagues in the industry. We've been working tirelessly with our coalition of partners to build this in a way that is fit for purpose and accessible and brings value to all. Today, we launched the MVP, or minimum viable product version of this. And sometimes it isn't the easiest thing to explain data and analytics and vision in words. So with that said, we thought that it would be easier to share our concept with you in a beautifully produced, super easy film that our Marcoms team has put together. So please enjoy our Data Hub explainer film.
Imagine a world where travel impact data just clicked. Right now, one hotel calls it recycling, another calls it zero waste. Labels and badges don't align, and the numbers scattered, inconsistent, hard to trust. Making sense of this information is as simple as finding your black suitcase at Baggage Reclaim. It's not the industry's fault. They're asked to report the same data again and again and again, in different formats, for different platforms. Without clarity, better choices in travel can't scale. That's why Travelist exists. We're the independent global coalition, uniting the biggest names in travel and tech to drive progress. Our experience has led us to create the Data Hub, a game-changing open system for tourism that makes data visible where it matters. For the industry, it means efficiency and alignment on a global scale.
Hello.
For travellers, the ability to make more informed choices. So why us? Well, we've done it before. Scaling emissions information from flights to billions of searches worldwide. Now, we're applying the same model across travel and tourism. Industry-wide progress requires industry-wide collaboration. We need your support for the Data Hub to go further. Join us. Use data to change travel for good.
Very, very exciting. Some of the important reflections for me upon sharing that film with all of you is that our role at Travelist is to collect and aggregate and harmonize at scale the important sustainability data for our industry and then distribute that at scale. And this is currently unavailable to the industry. The data sets that exist are fragmented and often sit behind paywalls. Travelist is the trusted steward of this infrastructure that was built with our coalition and our collaborators. We're a non-commercial entity, and so as such, we're an independent steward of this data for our sector, agnostic to its final use case. Right, let's take you through the essentials of the data hub that we have built with our coalition. This data hub is an interoperable system, actually platform, built for anyone in travel and tourism, from hoteliers, certifiers, OTAs, GDSs, etc. And the goal is to drive positive impact through unlocking the healthy flow of essential sustainability information for the whole system. This has been developed in consultation and collaboration with all of our Travelist partners and many industry stakeholder groups. This version of the Data Hub, this minimum viable product that we're launching today to our coalition, is aligned with Greenhouse Gas Protocol reporting. For future purposes, it will be shaped to international and EU legislation, for example, aligning with the PEF, the Product Environmental Footprint regulations for accommodation, which are currently being developed in the EU, empowering consumers directives and any green transition directives, as well as keeping abreast with legislation and compliance requirements from other parts of the globe. The role of the Data Hub is to unlock the flow of sustainability data and make it comparable, consistent, credible, and compliant at scale. With Travelist's unique partners, we are the only organization positioned to be able to collect this data at global scale and to distribute it to end users at global scale. So our role at Travelist is to unblock this flow of data and make it easy to access. Once it's distributed to various data users, it's up to the data users in the industry to catalyze and optimize their initiatives by the use of this data at a scale never achieved before. And we're hoping to see positive decisions and systems change affected by the use of this data. So how does it work in practice for the industry? The Data Hub is defined by three core functions: the ingestion of data, the processing of that data, and then the distribution of that information to support a variety of use cases. The Data Hub will ingest sustainability data from both individual small hotel operators, Airbnbs, short stay rentals, and large-scale hotel chains, as well as large-scale data providers, existing data sets, and existing data operators in the system. Once that data comes into the Data Hub, think of this as the engine room, that data is processed into a universally agreed string of clear, compliant, and comparable data. And that information is then used, once it's distributed, to support a variety of use cases. It's display ready, so booking platforms will be able to display it, internal reporting uses, analytics dashboards, the creation of baseline, policymakers can use it for destination benchmarking. Once it's distributed, that data can support the analytics that's so important for the positive change that we want to see in our industry. This first version of the Data Hub that we will demo to you shortly, or our minimum viable product version of this Data Hub that's being released today, has the following metrics. We focused on the universal criteria, that is the universal sustainability key indicators that were announced by the World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance at COP in Azerbaijan last year and endorsed by UN Tourism. And so it focuses on environmental metrics. The Data Hub includes greenhouse gas emissions per bed night, renewable energy sources, and the proportion of energy that comes from those renewable sources, and then sustainability certifications for that particular accommodation that is submitting their information. This is the data set that decision makers want to know about accommodations, is pre-competitive and should be made available at scale to the industry in an open access way.
These are what we believe to be the data points that should be pre-competitive. This is what should be readily available to industry. This has value and meaning to multiple decision makers around the industry. And this is, you'll see sort of buckets, we call them categories of emissions data, renewable energy attribute data, as well as sustainability data. And just from this small, I would say small because we know how large of a data set accommodation sustainability data is, just from this small handful of data points, we've really just started to understand what are the opportunities that this can unblock in the industry. If we can go to the next slide, please. These data points themselves can really just help us, if we start thinking about what could just that simple set of data points mean for us. Imagine travelers can now make informed decisions on where they stay. Destinations can plan and incentivize for impact and monitor effectively. Really important. It's great to incentivize, but really important that you can monitor and manage the outcome of your incentivization. And then in future, things like hotels, properties, and hoteliers groups can then use that information to baseline and benchmark on a scale that's never been achieved before. And really, this is more about just raising ideas around what the endless opportunities are for us as an industry, where we can all just have access to this pool of data that is trusted and credible. And honestly, it feels like the possibilities are endless. So I don't know about you, but for me, the opportunities just excite me, and it is what is to come and what is to come for us as an industry. It really makes me excited. So I'm now going to move or hand over rather to my colleague Priyant to talk us through some of the details.
Thanks, Jess. Ems, if you can just move to the next slide. Okay, so I think quickly just to cover a few key users and key actors in the ecosystem. You have a data contributor, you have a data distributor, and you have the end user. So a data contributor can be classified by any organization or platform that will share data into the data hub. And examples of that will be a membership body, hotel groups, and hotels. A data distributor will be an organization that integrates into the data hub, and they'll ingest the data and use it in their own systems for potential use cases thereafter. An example of that would be an OTA, a GDS, booking platforms, tour operators. They'll be responsible for distributing the data that the data hub will ultimately provide. Then you'd have the end user, who will ultimately be the individual or entity that will view the information once it's distributed, and based on the relevant use case, will then, get that value from the data that will be shared. So that will be sort of an example of that use case would be a traveler that's actually choosing a property based on the sustainability metrics that the data hub would actually provide. Ems, if you could just move on to the next slide for the demo. Thankfully, I'll be doing a live voiceover for this. So if you could just press play. Okay, so essentially, we're going to be talking about the demo. And as Jess and Julie alluded to, there's 3 points or processes: ingestion process, a data process, or a normalization process, and a distribution process. So if we touch on the first process, which would be data ingestion, there's 3 ways that you can do this: via manual capture, a file upload, or programmatically via an API. So we're going to cover the first use case, which would be a manual capture. So if you could just pause here, Ems, a few elements that would assumptions that we would need to make. I think firstly, it's a property or a group will be logged into our platform, and they will have access to a front end that will allow them to manually input data into the ecosystem. So this is a visual representation of that front end, and I'm going to talk you through the process of adding data into the front end. So if you could just press play, Ems, someone would log in, navigate to the metric that they want to add the value, choose the relevant date range, apply the date range to that data point, click on add. It will then automatically add it to the ecosystem or the system, and then you could continuously move on to the next element that you would like to capture. Second part would be file upload, where we have a predefined and pre-configured template that will align to how the data will need to be uploaded. One would then download that template onto their local machine. They'll add the relevant date range like you would in the manual capture, but this you'll be able to add it in bulk. You then save it onto your desktop, import it from your desktop into the application, inputs it into the data hub, and it will automatically save for calculation. So that's just going through that process of file upload. Then via API, this is basically a few elements that we'll need to consider that we'll need to, if you could just press pause here, Ems, we'd need to technically set up between a data contributor and a consumer. We'll need to integrate technically, and it will enable an API ingestion for that specific entity. We'll provide an endpoint. An endpoint will define whether you can contribute data in bulk or in single data points. We'd have a predefined text. You'd add the relevant data points that you'll need to add in a format that we'll share with you. You will then send it on through to the API, and the API will, over the internet, accept the data and then aggregate it further. If you can just press play, EMS, that's just walking through that process. I think key metrics on if you could just press pause, Ems. I think the key metrics that we'd want to cover is that alignment with WSHA's universal criteria. I think it's important. And I think from an MVP data point perspective, it's aligned with the reporting needs and have been selected based on, the capture at source. And I think just spoke through what would be minimally viable for this specific initiative. If you can move on, Ems, just to talk about data processing. We are going to basically cover how the blockchain is defined. So that's essentially a new initiative that we're launching as Travelers to define and bring in the blockchain technology. If you can press pause, essentially we creating a unique property identifier for every property that's created in through to the data hub, so we can manage the life cycle of data that's ingested and consumed. And we have an auditable ledger that will be able to align with compliance needs and showcase the life cycle of a data point from the time it's ingested into the system till the time that it's consumed. So we have a series of calculations and conversions that will automatically be applied post data ingestion. And once that data is calculated, it will be stored, and a universal string will be available in the same format that you've seen above for it to be consumed and then further aggregated in use cases or further line of business systems. If you could move on, this is just a visual representation of what that blockchain would look like, and it's quite comprehensive. So I think a few principles here around traceability we've spoke about. I think it aligns with all of the best practices globally, GDPR being one of them. And I think from a carbon data perspective, it's fully GHG compliant and aligned with all of the LCA methodology. And I think the blockchain specifically, it's worked in if you could just press pause, Ems, the blockchain concept has worked in financial services to provide auditability and traceability of records. And this is just trying to use what has worked in that industry and bring it to sustainability so that we can create a more robust data set. Moving on to the distribution. So again, two ways. You can do it via API or via file access. The API element will just allow you to then plug into a predefined API, choose your relevant date range, your data point access, and then we will return all of the data for you programmatically. And similarly with a file, we are able to auto-generate a file with the blockchain, and we'll predefine that file generation, and you'd be able to then download that file and then aggregate it further. And that's just a visual representation of what that file will actually look like. So I think Jules and Jess said this best around trying to empower better decision making, and essentially that's what the Data Hub is intended to achieve. If you can move on to the next slide, Ems. Okay, so I think where to next? A few verticals for us is I think firstly rail to take the methodology that we've learned in with the travel impact model in aviation and now with accommodation and apply that same logic to rail to understand how we can display carbon emissions in that vertical, destinations, as well as trying to create a whole ecosystem where you could have a full itinerary end-to-end solution that will encapsulate all of the verticals in one central platform. So on to the next slide, Ems. So before I hand over to Julie, I think just a point around us building the engine. We've built the engine, and now we actually need a sustainability fuel in order to empower that engine and take it to the speeds and the heights that we feel it can reach. So Jules, over to you.
Thanks, Priyanth, for that excellent demo. The one thing that I wanted to emphasize from Priyanth's demo is that blockchain that you saw, that is the format in which data is distributed once it's been transposed into a harmonized, consistent, compliant string of agreed data for distribution. That blockchain is what will underpin in the next version of the Data Hub verifiability, because third-party auditors and the like will be able to access that blockchain, which is essentially an immutable record, to be able to verify that data. So in the next iteration or two of this Data Hub, not only will the information be consistent and compliant, it will also be verifiable, which is really important, as we all know, for legislative requirements, that we have the ability to do that. So as Priyanth says, and Jess says, we have a fully functioning end-to-end Data Hub solution, from ingestion to transposition to distribution of this very important data at scale through our incredible global technology partners who form the coalition of Travelist. What we need, the fuel to make this grow now and to make it function for all of us on the call, all of us in the industry, is the data. So we need, from accommodation providers and the like, folks that are, in ownership of big data sets of sustainability data, whether they be, certification bodies, data service providers, data analytics providers, hotel chains, teeny tiny single hotels or short-term rentals. We need all of your data in the Data Hub. And so we will keep you posted as to when you can actually push your data in directly. And then we need support to be able to scale this. We do need engineers, funding, QA, designers, warehousing, database administration, because global solutions are expensive. And our incredible coalition partners have supported us to build this amazing end-to-end interoperable solution. And now we are actively supporting philanthropic funding to allow it to scale, to process billions and billions of data points rather than hundreds and thousands. Great. I think that it is time to get to some Q&A. So we've already got some fantastic questions in the chat. I think I might start there. If I'm not able to answer something, I'll pass it on to Jess or Priyanth or someone else that might be able to answer in the team. Otherwise, we'll commit to come back to you. So Saskia says, what about non-CO2 emissions? Do you implement them? Yes, so Saskia, the information that we collect, the data that we ingest for greenhouse gas emissions is not just CO2. So it's all different energy sources, and then those conversion factors are applied and the calculations are applied to a CO2 equivalent of greenhouse gas per occupied room night, and in subsequent versions also per meter squared and per bed night, etc. Cornelia asks, are all three scopes included for greenhouse gas protocol? Only some of scope 3 is included in this first version, but we will work to continue to include all aspects of the scope. And Cornelia, that's important because the PEF for accommodation that will be promulgated out of Europe also includes a lot more of the scope 3 criteria and attributes. Great. There's some tips on how to manage the sound issue. Thank you so much. Rachel Reed asks, how are we measuring flight footprint? So, Rachel, we launched years ago with the Travelers Coalition partners and run by Google on behalf of our coalition, the travel impact model. And the travel impact model is an industry agreed and industry governed methodology for calculating and distributing flight emissions. So it's the most broadly used. I know that there are various options for calculating flight emissions, but the TIM is the most broadly used methodology for calculating flight emissions. And if you look up any flight using Google or Skyscanner or any of our kind of partners or even airlines themselves, you will see the flight emissions that are shown in all of those search instances. And so that is the TIM, or the travel impact model, essentially, which was one of the first things that Travelist delivered after we were formed. Cornelia,
Jules?
scope 3 includes F&B. Yes, absolutely, especially when we get to the next versions. Jess?
Sorry, Jules, I was just going to say, I'm noticing a theme in a lot of the questions, really asking around, can we clarify what or how we're going to be validating and verifying and really ensuring that we are getting accurate data at source, and how we'll manage that process. So if you can just elaborate on our approach there.
Sure. Would you like to answer, Jess, or would you like me to carry on?
I'll go for it, Jules.
Okay, sure. So the data is tagged as to whether it is primary data, so in other words, actual data of fuel consumption, for example, or actual data submitted by a hotel, or whether it's secondary data or calculated data using a proxy, for example, a proxy coefficients. And so there's a hierarchy of data in the system as well. Primary data is always preferable because that can be verified, right? And then the data can be verified not in this first MVP version because that's close to our partners, but in subsequent versions when it is released to be completely open access, then third-party auditors will be able to access that blockchain using the permissions granted in terms of the license agreements, which data contributors and data distributors will need to sign those licensing agreements, and so we'll all abide by that use of data. And so based on those conditions, verifiers will be able to verify the data. And then data will be indicated as verified or not verified when it is displayed.
So, Jules, if I could just also elaborate from a tech point of view. So there will be a series of triangulations that will occur post ingestion. So what you've seen now is our ingestion, transposition, and distribution pipeline. But in parallel to that, we'd have our auditing and our validation pipeline that will take the data that would have been ingested, and we'll go through a series of additional verifications. Evidence-based one is one where utility bills can be verified either via OCR or via API. And then you'd have third-party verifiers where we'll be able to take a unique identifier on the blockchain, pose the request and the subsequent records and get a validation response, at which point we'll then append that score to a relevant record. So the intention is to use evidence-based validation on a technical level, series of triangulations where we'll take actual versus validated, understand what is correct and what isn't, and then subsequently highlight what is and ask for it to be validated, all of which is on our roadmap for version 1 and version 2, which is what Julie spoke about to potentially scale the solution.
Thank you, Pri. Jess, because you can see all of the questions, perhaps it's better if you feed me a question that is being asked more frequently rather than me going sequentially, because I might then miss some of the more frequently asked questions. Okay.
100%. We've got a question around how will the Data Hub plan to collaborate with other platforms that are already collecting data from hotels?
Sure. So I think it's important to realize that Travelist's role is as an independent nonprofit company and coalition. That means that we don't commercialize any of our solutions. However, we do integrate and collaborate with all of our partner platforms and many non-partner platforms that we work with in different partners. And so, I mean, in different projects and programs. So any data collector, data provider, anyone who has access to this kind of data can push their data into the Data Hub. using direct capture methodology or an API or a worksheet like a CSV bulk file upload. And so we can take in that data from existing platforms and then normalize it into the same string as the standard that has been agreed for distribution by our OTA and our other partners. And so anybody that would like to contribute data or distribute data is able to contact Travelist. They're able to get access to the license agreements and then provide their data accordingly. It is important to note, though, that this first version for the next few months will only be open to our partners because it is an MVP and it's launched today. We are testing with our partners and we're constantly iterating and finding ways to improve it. But we will keep you all posted through these webinars, through our communication channels as to when you will be able to access it directly and start to participate in the data flow.
Great, thanks, Jules. So how is this different from the existing platforms in the industry that already does this? And let's go with that one first as a follow-up.
Yes, so the platforms in the industry that currently do this, there are some amazing solutions, but they are not open access and they're not necessarily using the universal criteria and displaying in a universally aligned format that our partners will agree to display on their platforms. And so in order to try to harmonize, there's a great amount of fragmentation, folks calculating in slightly different ways, ingesting in different ways, distributing in different ways, having different rules. And these are commercial solutions, so they also sit behind paywalls. It's very important to us that sustainability data isn't only accessible to folks that have the money to pay for it. We believe that key sustainability information should be pre-competitive and not sit behind paywalls, the same as with the aviation travel impact model that doesn't sit behind a paywall. And so, Jace, the difference is that, first of all, this is open access, the key universal criteria and key performance indicators that are universally agreed to by our industry and strategic partners in our industry. That data will be modeled and pushed out in terms of those comparable indicators, and that will not be behind a paywall. And so that's how it's different.
Great. And Jules, can hotels opt out once they've contributed data?
Yes. So in terms of the license agreements, you can decide to be part of something or not part of something. Whether you put in your data directly into the data hub or whether your data is coming in through the CRM system of another platform or another partner, if you decide to change your permissions, then your data will no longer be featured in the data set.
And Jules, who owns the data?
So the data remains the property of the accommodation providers themselves. Travelist owns the IP for this interoperable solution on behalf of all of our coalition partners. But your hotel data remains your property, and we may collect a whole lot of data from you in order to do the calculations that then give us the final numbers that we can display in a consistent and compliant way. But we will only display those agreed predetermined set of information. We would not display any of your other data that is secure, no one can access it, and that remains the property of the hotels.
Amazing. I'm just going to read it. There were two questions that were submitted over LinkedIn that I just thought might be relevant to this conversation. The one is, how does the data hub and what is captured align with the SDGs?
Sure. So the data hub, the platform or the engine room of the data hub it is already prepared to ingest and then push out over 300 different data points. And those have been mapped against the SDGs, the GSTC criteria, the WTTC Hotel Basics and Plus, the net positive hospitality pathway of the World WSHA, World Sustainable Hospitality Alliance, the GBTA's Sustainable Procurement Guidelines, etc. But the only ones that our entire industry so far has agreed upon are the universal key indicators or universal criteria for environmental data that were announced last year at COP in Azerbaijan by the WSHA and endorsed by UN Tourism. And so only those environmental data points relating to greenhouse gas footprint, and we've added into that renewable energy as a component of footprint, as well as certifications which have also been agreed by the industry, will be released in this first version of Data Hub.
Great, thanks, Jules. I'm going to read this one purely because I think it's great for everyone to hear, but also the question is super relevant. This was logged on LinkedIn as well as a question, but also a comment. This is an outstanding and necessary initiative. The launch of the Data Hub is a critical step because it provides the foundational tool needed to engineer widespread change. Great to see they got it. And how will you ensure data from diverse, smaller and community-based operators can be integrated into the hub in a way that is both scalable and equitable?
I'm very excited about this question. Last year, Travelist acquired Weaver sustainability platform for accommodations, and that was repurposed to create this interoperable, almost data exchange engine room to allow this industry-wide solution. But at the heart of that solution was the small, medium, micro enterprises, independent hoteliers, small groups, B&Bs, short-term rentals, camping and glamping. And we wanted to retain that SME focus of the Data Hub. And so whilst large hotel chains and large purveyors of accommodation data sets can push their data directly into our hub digitally, we are building with one of our partners an app interface that will be released next year so that small and micro and medium enterprises can make use of that app to input their data directly into the system. And that gives them an opportunity to use that data themselves, as well as for them, their important information to be consistently displayed by all of the Travelist partners who will elect to display this data.
Just on that note, Jules, before we move on to another sort of topic, I just wanted you to clarify, does Travelist plan to reinstate Weaver and commercialize the technology?
No. So when we acquired Weaver, in a philanthropic purchase for the greater good, the company was wound down. It will never be used for commercial purposes again. The purpose of that acquisition was to use aspects of the functionality, essentially the brilliant code base that had been built for universal greater good. And so to really open it up for that systems change, systemic impact that Travelist wishes to have. So no, I'm sorry, I know many of you wish that Weaver would come back, but we can't bring it back because this is more important than one hotel, unfortunately, for the universal good. We are going to be displaying critical data and unlocking that healthy flow of important sustainability data for all users and all decision makers.
Great. Let me just take this question from Darren in the chat quick, Jules. It says, congrats on this initiative and the launch. I just wondered how supportive your partners have been in eventually showing the sustainability info on their platforms to consumers. I'll ask the follow-up
Thank you,
after.
Darren. So that really incredibly supportive. The Travelist Coalition partners determine our course of action for any given 1 to 3 year strategic period together. Just like together we worked on the first version of the accommodation criteria and you know that framework of variables. We collected and displayed, or not displayed, but collected millions of data points around sustainability accommodation attributes. The same for the travel impact model, the same for certifications, where you see the whole industry working together so that travelers can provide a list of certifications on our website that are recognized and compliant with various criteria. So our partners have all worked really closely with us on this. Different partners have different expertise. So some have specifically worked with us on security, data security, governance, others on data ingestion, others on what can be distributed, what can't be distributed. At the moment, in this MVP version, because the data is not yet verified, and because we've got the initial three criteria, this data could be used by our partners for business travel calculation purposes. It'll take the next version or two before our partners will be able to display this information to leisure travelers in a compliant way. But that is the ultimate goal. Just like our partners are able to display flight emissions, they will be able to display hotel information. We're hoping towards the end of next year, consistently in a compliant manner across the board. You'll be able to see, does this hotel make use of renewable energy? What percentage of renewable energy? What is the greenhouse gas footprint emission, per room night or per square meter? What certification does this hotel have? And that's the basis for the first display.
And Jules, when do we envisage that we might start seeing this in booking search results?
I'd say towards the end of next year. I'll defer to Priyan on that, but we've got some more MVP testing to go. We're hoping that by the middle of next year, this is a fully open system and we can pull in data from all sorts of other sources, and that we will immediately display for various use cases. But to actually display on sort of OTAs to the leisure traveler at scale, we're thinking probably towards the end of next year. Of course, our wonderful partners do work really quickly, so you may see that time frame come back. Who knows?
Great. Jules, I think just in the interest of time, I think we should just sort of close and tie things up, and then we can let folks get back to their days. So maybe if we can just go to the our QR code, Ems, if you don't mind, please.
Okay, great. So if you would like to be involved in the Data Hub, if you would like to, as soon as we open, be able to put your accommodations data into the Data Hub, or just follow us or subscribe to our newsletter to understand how in future tour operators can be involved, DMCs can be involved, destinations can be involved as we grow this product, then please use a QR code. And you can fill out the survey, or you can email our partnerships team, partnerships@travelist.org. We are starting a waiting list for accommodations that would like to, or industry service providers that would like to start to contribute data. We already have a couple that we're working with in this pilot period. So please join the waiting list if you would like to, as a chain or industry service provider or individual accommodation, start to provide your data, and we will get back to you in the process. So appreciate you being here with us, and being with us with our ultimate mission to change the travel industry for good. And ultimately, we can include full itinerary information in here: flights, restaurants, exhibitions, and together we can really make the changes that we wish to see in the world. Please join us for the rest of the Insight series. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated, and have a great evening further.